Hey everybody, this episode it's going to take on certainly a little bit of a change of tone because up to this point, anybody that knows me knows that I'm all about the fiction. I'm all about the stories, the gruesomeness. So I'm here with my very good friend, author and artist, Dean Italiano, and we're going to go back 20 years talking about Dean's new book called Katrina After 20, which is all about Hurricane Katrina. Not just about the storm from an outsider's view, but very much the storm of an insider's view, where Dean and his husband, G, went down for a very beautiful romantic 10th year anniversary when the storm hit and they were stuck in it. And the stuff that is in this book is absolutely harrowing. There really, frankly, is nothing entertaining about this. It is more real than real. It's as terrifying as any horror story you might read, except it really happened. Dean, I want to open up by asking you, because for those that maybe aren't aware of Hurricane Katrina, maybe some of the younger audiences, or maybe those folks that have fuzzy recollections of it and only know it from a few different snippets of newspaper articles, how do you summarize something as horrific and monumental as Hurricane Katrina when somebody comes up to you and says, love the book cover, but what's it about?
I usually, and I know fewer and fewer people as we get older, haven't seen the movie Twister. If anyone who's seen Twister, there's a great line, very short line by Helen Hunt, where she has this horrible experience, and she comes out and they say, "What was it like? How was it?" And she says, "It was windy."
Hmm.
Because you can't really, unless you're in the middle of it, you cannot even begin to describe what it's like. So coming out with the shortest, simplest, little sentence sometimes is just the only thing that you can say. So people would, see us in the grocery store because we'd been interviewed on TV and radio and stuff like that. And people would say, "What was it like?" And I couldn't say anything other than it was windy or it was wet, because there's no other way of really getting across what it was like to go through some of those experiences, especially as a Canadian, because we know snowstorms, we know ice storms, we even know tornado drills and all of that kind of thing. We get tornadoes. We don't get hurricanes. We don't get the kind of storm that lasts for 8 hours and does the same kind of damage as a hurricane would. So as a Canadian, trying to describe to another Canadian, what was it like? Either read the book, or it was windy, it was wet. It's hard to go beyond that without telling the entire story, because it's not something that you can just say, "Oh, remember that time 5 years ago when we all experienced this, that, or the other thing." We just don't have that frame of reference. So it's a little bit hard to get it across quickly. So I just, like you had in your intro, we were on vacation, we were on a cruise, we pulled up to New Orleans with it following us in. And by the time we got there, there was no way out. So that's kind of the basics of what the story's about. Any of the details that come afterwards, I would have to sit and talk for a long time, or you'd have to read it, because there's no doing it justice by shortening it and making it into a little 5-minute summary, because I don't think it's fair to the story to cut it and edit it that much. So I end up just saying it's windy. It was windy.
So it makes me wonder too that, as the title alludes to, of course, Katrina After 20, maybe it took you 20 years to process everything that kind of happened, but why wait the 20 years to get this book out now the way that you have it written? And why did you feel that this was just the right time to get this book out now?
I had previous tellings, and I would tell people versions of this story, previous writings of the story, and I think there are many reasons for doing this now. Part of it was to have an ending to the story, because I feel like 20 years ago, or even 15 years ago, when people were hearing or reading any experiences that I was sharing, it wasn't complete. And a lot of people had said to me, and then what? What happened after that? And things just hung. A lot of it hung over our heads without any final completion to it. And I think that with the jobs that I've had since, and we have our twin boys, our teenage boys are at a point where they're old enough to, they're 17, they're old enough to have their own lives. You look back a little bit more and you have a new understanding 20 years later after something happens where you can add to it, hopefully, more insight and, again, hopefully a proper ending. And that provides some closure for me, but hopefully anybody else who reads this will also see that things have come to a more rounded closing of the story, even though it's not over, but I wanted to close it because we have come to some conclusions. Some things have been fixed through therapy, talking it through, going through the story with people. And there are other things that are not going to be fixed. Some of those things include PTSD. And if anybody else out there has PTSD for whatever reasons, there are some things that you can work through and other things that just become a part of yourself forever. And you learn how to live with them and cope with them. I'm at that point now where I understand the difference between the things that I've been able to work through and some of the things that will be with me forever. I'll be conscious, I'll still work on them. But that has also come to light, the difference between how I dealt with things right after it happened and how things have settled into a place that's going to remain stable-ish. And I thought it's a good time to put it out with the anniversary of the hurricane coming up and the life stages that we're in right now.
Awesome. Well, and again, I really appreciate you being, not only brave in your own personal life, being able to get down to the point where you can write the story, but then to, come on here and share some of that story with everybody else in hopes that they read the book to get that perspective. But one thing that that fascinates me and intrigues me is I can only imagine, the emotional turmoil, the trepidation, maybe the anxiety and the fear of sitting down to write this story, first of all. And I can only imagine that maybe you had maybe a sort of a roadmap into what that might do to you mentally, emotionally, etc. And I'm just wondering if you wouldn't mind maybe taking us through that process of what you went through just to get to the point of being able to sit down to write, and maybe compare that to how it was on your emotions, on your mind, body, spirit, all that stuff, because, this sort of a trauma, it becomes very physical. Would you mind maybe walking us through that a little bit as far as comparing what you thought that journey of writing it down would be and how the act of writing it down was for you on a emotional, physical, spiritual level?
Yeah, there are a lot of pieces that were in play at all times. One of the first things when we came back, and I'll tie in the radio interview that I had as well, one of the local stations wanted to talk to us about what was going on because there was still very little information. My first driving force was to try to get people to understand and learn what was really happening down there, because I knew from watching Anderson Cooper, there was limited information and not all of it was the truth because you couldn't see what was going on at street level.
Right.
So my first instinct was people have to know. Oh my God, people have to know. Mostly, can you help them? Here's what's really going on. Can you help them? So when I was telling this story on the TV and radio interviews, that was one of my driving forces. And even while I was writing the story, people need to know what really happened and to find out what the truth was beyond what you saw on TV because it was so limited. So that was one of the driving forces to even start or consider writing the story at all. Once I was into it, that's a completely different shifting of gears. I had, while I was down there, a little notebook, Marvin the Martian notebook. And because there were lulls of time in between, I would sit and make notes and describe things and try to wrap my head around what was happening in the moment and processing it. So with that notebook, I would go back and sometimes see a point form or just a couple of words that would describe 3 or 4 hours of things that were happening. And at other times, I would find entire pages of description over something that happened in 5 minutes, trying to decide what deserves and demands more attention and more description, as well as trying to figure out sometimes what happened first. Was it the walk out to the restaurant or the walk to find the phone? Trying to sift through some of those and make sure that it was accurate. You have this drive to let the story out, this emotional piece where you want to work through each of those sentences, but also the journalistic, and I'm not a journalist, the part of you that wants to get the story right and accurate, that journalist side that needs to focus on the facts, we're all playing at the same time. So it was a little difficult to balance it because I usually write fiction, making it into something that was fair and honest and factual, and with the emotion and with the drive. It tore at me oftentimes as I was working between all of these pieces.
Yeah, and I can only imagine that. I think anybody that's sitting back that is just simply trying to imagine it, hopefully like me, is considering themselves extremely grateful that, this book, your experience of it, is as close as they're going to get to this, because I'm sure that at that point, and that had to be pretty tough as well to write, because I know as somebody that's read this, that you don't try to put any flowery prose into that at all. You definitely display yourself and G as two extremely vulnerable people. Like you said, you're used to writing fiction where, even the victims have some sort of qualities of strength to themselves, but in this instance, you very much portrayed yourself. I think your biggest strength in this was to simply just keep going and just try to get out. And I think you conveyed that extremely well. There's a lot of truth in that, where people, I'm sure, imagine, what would I do in that situation? You're like, a zombie apocalypse, I would do this, I would do this. No, you probably won't do any of that stuff. And not only was that, I can only imagine, pretty, very, very tough, and having to go back to that to write it all down. You and G, from what I understand, your husband actually went back there to, yes, the scene of the event, the scene of
Everything.
Katrina, of everything.
Yeah.
Number one, what did it take for you to decide to go back there again, and what was that like for you? Can you walk us through that? I can only imagine.
One of the things I didn't expect when we first got back, and I've heard it about other people who've joined the army and gone on tour and have come back, and their first drive is to go back. And it's hard to get your head around, why would you want to go back? That was the first thing I felt. We have to go back and help. We have to go back and do something. I did not expect that, because I am in no means a hero or could actually do anything for anybody. I don't know how to build houses. I don't know how to save people. I don't know how to do any of that. But that was the I need to go back and help drive, which I now understood after talking to people who had been on tours and needed to get back. That was part of it. After, and I'm trying to remember how many years, might have been 6 or 7 years after, we went back to visit, partially driven by that need to go back, but also we needed New Orleans to be a place where we were tourists again. We needed to see things normal. We had to be on Convention Center Boulevard and see cars. That was a really important one. We went to the Superdome to see where the parking lot was because of the flooded memories that we were still getting. And the entire driveway and parking lot section was gone. They moved it. They rebuilt that. That was good and bad. I was kind of hoping to see it empty, but not seeing it all was okay, you know? So we went to the different hotels. We went to the different streets. We went to where, you know, the phones were and the restaurants and where the people helped us. We needed to go back and see it in a normal state.
Right.
We also have, we have a few friends in New Orleans, but one in particular is a chef. And he was taking us through the French Quarter and we were looking for something to eat and he's describing all the different restaurants. It was just fun. And we saw a parade go by and it was fun. And as much as all of the other memories and images were still hanging heavy on our hearts, we needed to go back to experience it in the way that New Orleans should be experienced, because it is a wonderful, vibrant, awesome city. And the French Quarter is amazing. It always has been. And seeing how that city has bounced back and rebuilt and the spirit is still there, that was amazing to get back and to put that city back into our heads and hearts the way it was the first time we went years before the hurricane. So that was our third time going back. And we needed to have that too.
That's fantastic. I've got goosebumps just thinking about that, what that experience would be like to go back there and to finally see it.
Oh,
what a perspective that
we cried a lot. We sat on a bench on Convention Center Boulevard and I was just bawling, like, because everything flooding back, but also seeing it normal. I was, you know, you're sitting out on the middle of the street like a crying mess. I didn't care. Whatever, you people can laugh at me. I don't care.
Yeah, hey, you know, it's a magical place and nobody knows what magic might be working through you. So I'm sure it's just another day in New Orleans for passerbys. So no, that's incredible. And it's fascinating to me in the way it almost seems like you sort of confronted your villain in a sense and got to see what that environment looks like with the villain kind of vanquished, if they can be at all vanquished. Whereas, of course, I think that's always going to be, you know, the spirit, if you will, of that catastrophe. I think is always going to be part of New Orleans now, just like you mentioned earlier, is always going to be, in a big sense, a part of you. And to get on to the next question, that might be a bit of an odd one to ask, because I know you mentioned that you're certainly not a hero, and I think that, you know, going back to, you know, even like you mentioned before, war veterans. I mean, we've all seen, you know, Band of Brothers. Well, most of us have seen Band of Brothers. If you haven't, go see it. It's awesome.
Yeah.
But a lot of the things that these heroic men and women in the service would talk about was, I wasn't a hero. I was just in a group of heroes. And maybe that felt that way for you because eventually, you know, you and some other folks, they get rescued and got out of their own buses. And I can imagine that, I think there's certainly some heroism in what you have achieved as far as taking all that's now part of you and learn how to live with things and manage them as best as you can to be, you know, as functional as you can to kind of go on and to have a family and then be able to have the guts to get back there and to write about it. I think is pretty damn heroic in itself. And through the act of all of that, your experience, did you manage to take away any positivity from that experience, even though it might not have seemed that way at the time? I know I was a little reluctant to ask you that question, but I'm very curious if there was any kind of positivity that you're able to take from that, again, that catastrophic event that maybe you're putting to heroic use, if you will.
That's a really tricky question. There's a few ways that I can answer it. One of the first is that I have walked away with a deeper understanding of what happens to beautiful people in times of terror and desperation. And when you're saying, you know, in zombie apocalypse, what I would do, understanding the reality of what you would do or wouldn't do. Personally, I had moments where I was an absolute coward, or I look back and I'm ashamed that I wasn't I wasn't a hero. I didn't save anybody. I didn't do the things that you would hope that your personality and who you are would prevail. And you have those failures, and everybody there had different things that they were struggling to get through in order to survive. And it wasn't pretty. And sometimes it was downright awful or um, just hard to deal with. To walk away and have that deeper understanding of that side of humanity, I think was one of the gifts. To have that added to my understanding of the world and to be able to accept it and see the beauty of it. Even though, people can be a hot mess,
Sure.
we prevail, and there are people that are there for each other in the capacity that they can be,
Right.
and that's always got to be good enough. So that was one of them. Something else positive, I think, as I was going through some of the notes, I found a few things that made me laugh. And not that it was funny at the time, but it
Sure.
kind of was. I was sitting beside a dead bird for a while, and it became my little friend. And I'm reading back, I'm like, that's just freaking hilarious. Or there was a dead frog floating in the pool at one point, and I'm reading back through that, and I'm like, you have to find the humor and stuff like that, even when times are difficult and you're in the New Orleans heat and there's no AC and no power and no nothing. We were making each other laugh. We were playing a poker game with someone who didn't know how to play poker, and we didn't wipe him out. We didn't clean him out. So there were these lighthearted moments that can still happen,
Sure.
even in some of those darkest times where you're scared, you're terrified, you don't know where food or water are going to come from, to still be able to sit with these strangers and play a game of poker or sit beside a dead bird or be amused by a dead frog that's floating by. I mean, it's just kind of,
Yeah.
you laugh at it. It's a dark humor thing, but I
You
think,
gotta, even in the irony of it, you have to laugh at things.
yeah, yeah. And I think, not only recognizing the darkness and human souls trying to get through it, but also we were there for each other in our own strange and odd ways.
Yeah, and I think that is a beautiful thing when you have at least that aspect of it, that come togetherness of it in a sense. I mean, our Mr. Dress Up, like he always said, and when he was asked, when children would say, what do we do when all these horrible things are going on? Yeah, I think it was post 9/11, and the kids would ask on that, and his advice to them was just simply look for the helpers.
Mr. Rogers.
Or Mr. Rogers, just for not Mr. Garofalo. He's amazing too.
Yeah.
Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. Yeah, he just always said, "Go look for the helpers."
Yeah.
And it sounds like you, at the very least, were perhaps one of the helpers, whether it was moral or otherwise. That's people are able to come together with too. So
I told stories while we were down there, and I tried to fill in some of the long hours. But speaking of the helpers, we did see a lot of people with their fishing boats going out to get people off of their roofs. We did see the helicopters coming in, and we heard them constantly over and over and over going out, even at night with the big headlights, to get people off of their roofs. I mean, that's hope. That sense of hope that it brought was really amazing.
and then dropping rations down as well. I remember LG wrote a song about that too, and I'll never exactly what you said. To this day, I'll never forget that song, but one line in particular where he talked about how even beautiful people can do desperate things, specifically about how they react with these rations coming down. And it was something else. We definitely get that juxtaposition, I suppose, of people at their best and people at their, and great people just simply at their most desperate to survive.
Yeah.
Regarding survival as well, anybody that's maybe watching this that has been through, some sort of a terrible disaster, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's, something brought on by the hand of somebody else, losing their home, losing their environments, from everything that you've taken in and your journey and all the work that you put in over the 20 years to kind of get yourself as whole again as possible, or maybe even just to redefine a new whole and for yourself. What advice would you give to somebody that sat down and think, oh my God, you survived this. I'm just still here trying to survive and get through and see tomorrow. What can I do that might help me, Dean?
At first, I had people say you should go and see a therapist, PTSD, all this kind of thing. And my first reaction was no, because nobody will understand this. Nobody that I know of in Canada was on Convention Center Boulevard with us. So no one will get it. And that sense of being alone can trap you. And you need to open up some of those doors and talk through it, so that at least you're not feeling alone and someone else can say to you, this reaction is normal, that reaction is normal, maybe try this to help you through it. There are people who are trained professionals who can help you see a way through, or techniques or strategies to live with or work through some of the problems that you're still carrying. But writing about it, the hardest part was honesty. Being as honest as I could about the ugliness, the desperation, exposing some of that darkness, but doing it with dignity and to the best of my ability. And you always question your ability to do that all the way through the story. Am I doing them justice? Am I being fair? Because that's also, as I mentioned in the beginning, all your emotions are being tied in with this as well. And that little journalist on your shoulder, and you're trying to let all of your explosions mentally come out on the page and your heart poured out. But then you also have to just let it sit and give it some time, and then come back to it and say, what do I need to say? What do I want to say? How do I want to portray people? How honest am I going to be? Maybe I shouldn't use their names and give them nicknames, or some of the names we didn't know, and that was okay. But to be honest with yourself and find a balance between your feeling and your thoughts, your emotions, and the desperation. Therapy helped a lot. And when I was going through the book, I came across a few things. I had my therapist on speed dial. It's like, I'm at that point. I'm at that part. We gotta help me through this. I'm still feeling it more than I can deal with. So getting that help, and for me, writing it was very cathartic. It was therapeutic, but it was also something that I needed to share to get the story out for the people that were there as well. And I hope I did it justice, but that's not for me to say. I just did my best.
Yeah, no, and you did a fantastic job of it. Again, somebody that's read it, you did a phenomenal job. And obviously, there's so much. Some of the, the scariest, the most terrifying, god awful portions of your experience going through there. We haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg in any of our conversations here. I'm going to break the fourth wall here. As well, because some of you folks that are watching this might be wondering, first of all, I keep looking off the slide a little bit, and you might be thinking that Dean and I happen to share the exact same interior decorator who happen to set up a couple of the same things over here onto our lovely shelf. So I am lucky enough to bump knuckles here with Dean, because we're actually local with each other as well. So this has been brand new experience, which has been absolutely amazing to have. And I'm going to pass this book over as well to Dean. So Dean is going to take that magic, internet.
Thanks for having me and inviting me into your literal space.
100%.
To share all of this, and thanks for inviting me over.
Yeah, 1000%. So I will leave it to you to introduce the next part, which is going to be a reading to kind of give people a little bit of a sense of at least some of the stuff that they can find in the book.
Okay. So there are many parts of this book that I would find very difficult to read out loud, but I'm also very dyslexic, so I find reading out loud very difficult. So if I mess any of this up, you will just have to forgive me. I will do my best. Monday, August 29th, 2005. I opened my eyes. I only had time to see 4 something on my watch before the lights went out. I held my breath while I got my bearings. The Frenchman, Katrina, not in water, G snoring beside me, wind outside. I took a breath. Beep. The watch I bought for $10 on our cruise beeped every hour on the hour. I had played with the settings on the boat and never bothered to fix it. I knew it had to be 5 a.m. I could hear the building shift as it moved slightly. It wasn't pitch black out as I had expected. The morning hours made the sky an odd gray color. I grabbed my cell phone beside me to use the display light to see the floor well enough to find my jeans. The carpet was dry when my feet touched. If at any point I needed to be rescued, I wanted to be dressed. I slipped back into bed, careful not to wake G since there was nothing to worry about yet. I listened to the storm outside and watched a few bolts of lightning light up the sky. The large, heavy vanity that we had moved in front of the smaller window was bumping against the wall in a fairly steady rhythm. The larger, uncovered window was intact. We were both fine too. One after the other, I let out sighs of relief and calmed down. Beep. 6 a.m. I could hear banging around outside, similar to a trash can sliding down a street. There were duller thumps. From what I could see out the window, it just looked like a bad thunderstorm. But the larger window was blocked from a full street view. I could hear people walking around in the hallway. Chester was putting out candles so we could see a little better. Beep. G heard that one and got up at 7. We each took a shower. His was the last hot shower. Mine was damn cold and quick. When I ducked my head out our room's door, I could hear that there were people downstairs in the lobby. I was shocked at first, but when I looked closer, I saw that the first floor was dry and safe. Maybe hurricanes weren't that bad after all. We decided to go downstairs and join everyone since there was no more TV to find out what was going on in the outside world. The radio blared as we came down the steps and got our first real look at the storm through the front door window. I stopped halfway down the stairs for a minute, answered hello to Chester, and watched. In my short lifetime, I have seen rain come in sideways, blown around by the wind and thunderstorms. I've seen lightning hit the middle of a soccer field while I was playing center forward, and felt the buzz, and the body hair stood on end. I've driven major highways with rain coming down so hard people were pulling over because they could not see. I've seen whiteouts and snowbanks that were easily 20 feet high. I had never seen anything like a hurricane. Just on the other side of the glass was a wall of white and gray. There were moments when we could catch a glimpse of the building across the street, but an even stronger gust would come through and it would disappear again. Leaves and branches passed by at wicked speeds. The water didn't smack the door windows. It was constantly sucked against the glass. It was completely wet the whole time, submerged in turbulent water. As I continued down the stairs, and although Chester had made coffee earlier before the lights went out, there was none left. I didn't care. We grabbed a bit of food from the breakfast bins and sat in the lobby with Chicago, Chester, and another guy I hadn't met before that morning. We called him either Baseball Cap Guy or Washington when we found out where he was from. The radio reported to us that Katrina was a Category 4 when she hit land. We were on the west side of the storm, the good side. The Superdome also lost power. There was no air conditioning, and it was leaking. Of course, it was already getting hot by that hour in New Orleans. Bang, bang, bang. Chester saw that the sound startled me and explained that the hotel sign was broken and probably swinging into the front of the building. I know we all spoke about trivial things here and there during the storm, probably silly small talk. I don't remember, and I didn't write any of it down. Once I had a handle on what was happening, I wanted to sneak upstairs where the cell phone signal was better, to call people and let them know we were all right. I got halfway up and it hit me. I may not make it to the top. My fibromyalgia was in prime form. Since there was no way I was going to let the strangers in the room know about it, I stopped to look outside the window and rest before heading up again. Once at the top, I ducked into our room and called some of our friends and family to let them know that we were not underwater nor whisked away. The phone started to break up as I finished my conversation with my mom. I turned off my cell, grabbed a pen and my little Marvin the Martian notebook and my camera. On my way back down the stairs, I noticed how steep they were and made a mental note to only go back up when I absolutely had to. When we looked closely, we could see the shingles coming off the tops of roofs, and there were pieces all over the street. Some of the shutters were gone. There were large sheets of tin metal and eavesdrops sliding down the street, passing through large puddles. We heard screeching. The cast iron furniture set by the pool began sliding around. That was the creepiest thing I have ever heard in my life. We offered to help secure the cast iron furniture, but the staff wouldn't hear of it. I held open the side door for their return and looked up. The sky swirled. Faster and smaller circles spun inside the larger, slower circles. All different shades of gray and a little sunlight poking through. Swirling clouds and colors look so soft up there. More hypnotizing than a kaleidoscope. So beautiful, you almost forgot its power and destruction. That was the center of the storm, the eye, and the vortex accompanied by the constant sound of water and debris. I was told to come back in quickly and close the door when they were done. Hours had gone by, and the storm did not let up at all. There was no sign of it weakening. The radio crackled. The Hilton Hotel had 100 windows smashed in, and guests were being moved as quickly as they could to safer areas inside the hotel. Water was flowing over a levee. There were 30,000 people in the Superdome. Jefferson Parish was getting blasted. Biloxi, well, they didn't know how bad it was down there yet. People called into the station with their cell phones. "Can you help me? There's no more emergency lines to call, and I can't get out of my house," a lady pleaded. The radio announcer told her to stay where she was. She was safer inside her house for now. Another, older-sounding woman called in asking, "Are you the radio man?" She had a strong Louisiana accent. "Yes," he answered. "Maybe you can help me. I'm in my attic. I'm up to my waist in water, and I can't swim, sir."
Yeah. Anyway. Wow.
Yeah.
I have no words except thank you so much for having the guts to survive that, write about that, and read that again and share it with us. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dean, any final words that you have for anybody else watching this regarding Katrina After 20? Just to put you on the spot. I mean, you've already been through. Now that we've run you through the emotional roller coaster here,
Read again.
tell us what you think.
Final words. You know what? Some things that you go through in life, storms, trauma, they change you. And there are some things that you will carry forever. It doesn't mean that they're going to hurt less. You just learn how to carry it. I think is what I've learned from all of this.
Thank you very much, Dean. I don't know what else to say except thank you so much for...
Thanks for having me again.
You bet. And thank you everybody so much for watching this. Hopefully you got as much out of it as I did. I can't recommend the book enough. It is a harrowing experience. Certainly read it in segments. Make sure that you're okay when you read it. Keep the lights on. If you've got a pet, you might want to keep them nearby to pet them and so they can give you comfort, a stuffy, whatever, a cake, hot cup of tea. And read this book to give yourself a better understanding of not just what kind of hell on earth the storm presented to people, but the hope that came out of that storm and the people that have survived it as well, to get a full appreciation.
And there is a foreword by Poppy Z. Brite, as many people know as Billy Martin. So shout out for the foreword. That was very nice of him to do for me.
Yes. Thank you so much. Buy the book, guys. Thanks so much for joining, and we will see you guys later. Thank you, Dean.